Please make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. It had been 21 years since the day my husband walked out, leaving me standing in the doorway with 3 crying children clinging to my legs. I remember the slam of that door, the sound of his car engine fading into the distance, and the hollow silence that followed. He didn't just leave us, he abandoned us for her. The woman who, in my mind, became the shadow over every struggle we endured. I raised our kids alone. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals so they could eat, sold my wedding ring to pay for their school fees. Every time one of them graduated, got a job, or achieved something great, I silently whispered, "We did it without you." I learned to stop wondering where he was, or if he ever thought about us. He was gone. Until that night. The knock at my door was soft, almost uncertain, but when I opened it, my heart froze. There he was, older, grayer, and thinner, but those eyes, they were the same. Eyes that once promised me forever, then gave me nothing. And he had the audacity to smile and say, "Hi, honey. I'm home." My first instinct wasn't to cry, or scream, or even ask why he had come back after 2 decades. It was to look over my shoulder, making sure my children, now grown, weren't within earshot. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. He chuckled awkwardly, shifting from foot to foot like a man who knew he was trespassing in a place he once called his own. I thought maybe we could talk. I've been through some hard times, Anne. I cut him off before he could finish. "Hard times?" I stepped closer, my voice low and sharp. "You left me with 3 kids, no money, and a mortgage I couldn't afford. That was hard times. Yours?" I glanced at his wrinkled coat and the way his hands trembled. "That's just karma knocking back." His face tightened, but he didn't move. Instead, he took a slow breath, as if preparing himself for a speech. "I made mistakes. I know that. But I'm here now, Anne." "You don't get to be here now," I snapped. "Not after 21 years. You were gone for their first words, their school plays, their graduations. You missed it all. And now you show up on my doorstep like a ghost expecting a welcome?" He swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just a chance to explain." I stared at him for a long moment, then slowly reached for the door handle. He must have thought I was letting him in. But I didn't. I looked him in the eye and said, "You can explain to the wind, because that's all that's going to listen." And I shut the door in his face. But little did I know, that knock wasn't the last. And his return would unravel a truth I never saw coming. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd shut him out just like he'd shut us out 21 years ago. But I was wrong. 2 days later, I came home from work and saw him. Sitting in his old car across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed on my house. He didn't move when I pulled into the driveway. Didn't wave. Didn't drive off. Just watched. I ignored him, went inside, and locked the door. My heart was pounding, but I told myself, he'll get bored and leave. Except the next morning, he was still there. By the 3rd day, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked right up to his car, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Why are you here? I told you to leave." He didn't look at me right away. Instead, he glanced at the house, his gaze lingering on the upstairs window, my daughter's old room. "I need to talk to the kids," he said finally. "They're not kids," I shot back. "They're adults who have no interest in seeing you." His lips trembled, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't seen in him before, fear. "It's not about me wanting to see them. It's about me needing to warn them." "Warn them?" I scoffed. "What could you possibly warn them about? How to abandon a family without leaving a forwarding address?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There are people, bad people, who think I have something that belongs to them. And now," he glanced at the house again, "they think I gave it to one of our children. I froze. What are you talking about? I can't say everything out here, he whispered. But I've been running for years. And if they believe your kids have what they're looking for, his voice cracked, they'll come here. I took a step back, my stomach churning. You expect me to believe this? That some mysterious they are after you and now my kids are in danger? I don't care if you believe me, he said quietly. But you'll care when they knock on your door instead of me. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing. His words should have sounded like a bad movie plot, but something in his eyes, raw, desperate, made my skin crawl. I turned to go back inside, but before I shut the door, he called out one last thing. Ask your eldest about the box. She'll know. The door clicked shut, but my heart was wide open to a fear I hadn't felt in years. And that night, my eldest called me, her voice shaking, and said, Mom, I think someone's been in my apartment. I barely slept that night. Every sound outside became a threat in my mind, the rustle of leaves, a car passing, even the neighbor's dog barking. By morning, I was on the first train to my eldest daughter, Hannah's, apartment. She opened the door with dark circles under her eyes and her hands trembling. Tell me everything, I demanded as soon as I stepped inside. She led me to her living room, where her usually neat space looked wrong. The couch cushions were tossed on the floor, her desk drawers pulled open, papers scattered everywhere. I came home last night, Hannah whispered, and it was like this. Nothing big is missing, my laptop's still here, my TV, but... She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a small, ornate wooden box. It was no bigger than a jewelry case, carved with strange patterns. This, she said, her voice low, was in the middle of the table when I left for work yesterday. When I came home, it was under my bed. A shiver ran down my spine. Where did you get this? She hesitated. Dad gave it to me when I was 16. He told me to keep it safe, but never open it. My chest tightened. His words from yesterday echoed in my head, ask your eldest about the box. She'll know. I sat down and ran my fingers over the carvings. They weren't just patterns, they looked like tiny symbols, almost like an old language. The box had no visible lock, but the lid wouldn't budge. Hannah bit her lip. Mom, do you think this is what he meant? That people are after this? Before I could answer, a sharp knock rattled her front door. We both froze. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Hannah looked at me, her face pale. I'm not expecting anyone. I stood up, my heart pounding in my ears. Stay here, I whispered, moving toward the door. When I peeked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. A man in a dark suit stood outside, his hands clasped behind his back. His smile didn't reach his eyes. And beside him was a woman in a red coat, holding what looked like a photograph of Hannah. The man leaned closer to the door, as if he knew I was watching. His voice was calm, almost friendly. Mrs. Taylor, he said. We're here for the box. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The man's voice was steady, but there was something chillingly final in his tone, as if he wasn't asking, but informing me of what was about to happen. How do you know my name? I called through the door, my voice sharper than I intended. His smile widened. We know a lot more than that. We know you found the box. We know what's inside. And we know you don't understand its importance yet. Open the door, Mrs. Taylor, and no one gets hurt. Behind me, Hannah clutched the wooden box to her chest, her eyes wide with fear. I shook my head at her, silently mouthing, Go to the bedroom. Now. But instead of obeying, she whispered, Mom. I think it's time we opened it. The woman in the red coat stepped closer, her heels clicking against the hallway floor. Don't be foolish, she said, her voice low but carrying through the wood. Once it's opened, there's no undoing it. And trust me, Your husband knew that. My blood turned to ice. You knew my husband? The man chuckled softly. We worked with him. He wasn't the man you thought he was. Something inside me snapped. I yanked the chain lock into place and cracked the door just enough to meet his gaze. You're not getting this box. His eyes hardened, his pleasant mask dropping. We will. One way or another. He slipped a small, cream-colored envelope through the gap before I could shut the door. It fell to the floor between us. Open that when you're ready to stop pretending you don't want the truth, he said, before turning and walking away with the woman. The hallway fell silent. I locked the door and picked up the envelope. My name, Eleanor Taylor, was written on the front in my husband's handwriting. Hannah stood beside me, trembling. Mom, open it. With shaking hands, I tore the seal. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age. On it was a set of coordinates, and a date. The date was tomorrow. And the coordinates pointed to a location I knew all too well. The cliffside property my husband and I used to visit before everything fell apart. The place where he once told me, if anything ever happens to me, you'll find all the answers here. The next morning, the sky was bruised with grey clouds, heavy and low, as if they knew what I was walking into. Hannah sat beside me in the car, the box strapped into the backseat like a fragile passenger. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. The tension was a living thing between us, thick enough to choke on. When we finally turned onto the narrow, winding road leading to the cliffside, memories slammed into me like a punch. My husband's laughter carried on the wind. His arm around my waist. His whisper, "Promise me you'll keep our secret." The gravel crunched under the tires as I parked just short of the property gate. It was still locked with the same rusty chain I remembered, but someone had already broken it. Hannah's eyes met mine. They've been here. I reached for the box, my fingers brushing over the carved lid, and we stepped out. The salty air bit at my face, the wind tugging at my jacket. We followed the overgrown path to the overlook where the ocean crashed violently against the rocks below. That's when I saw it. An old wooden storage shed, half hidden by brambles. It hadn't been there before. The lock on the shed was smashed. I pushed the door open slowly, the hinges groaning. Inside was a table, and on it, an identical wooden box to the one we had. But this one was open. And empty. A sound behind us made my heart seize. Hannah gasped. We turned to see the man from last night standing in the doorway, blocking the only exit. The woman in the red coat was beside him, holding a pistol like it was just another accessory. "Took you long enough," the man said. "Now, give us the box, Mrs. Taylor." I stepped protectively in front of Hannah. "Not until you tell me what's inside." The woman smiled, cold and knowing. "Inside? You think it's about what's inside?" She took a slow step closer. "Your husband didn't leave you a treasure, Eleanor. He left you a target." Hannah's grip on my arm tightened. My breath came in shallow bursts. "What do you mean?" I demanded. The man tilted his head, almost pitying me. "That box contains the names of people your husband wronged. Powerful people. People who would kill to keep those names hidden." The woman's finger tightened on the trigger. "And they already know you have it." In the distance, the rumble of another vehicle grew louder, coming down the path. The man's expression flickered, annoyance, maybe even fear. He leaned in, voice low. "If you want to survive, Mrs. Taylor, you need to decide right now who you're going to trust." The approaching engine roared closer, a deep, guttural growl that made the woman in the red coat glance toward the path. Her grip on the gun tightened, but the man's eyes stayed locked on mine. "Eleanor," he said evenly, "you have about 10 seconds before that car gets here. If it's them, you'll wish you'd given me the box." Hannah's breath was quick and panicked. "Mom." The car's tires screeched as it came to a sudden stop just outside. A moment later, the heavy thud of boots hitting gravel reached my ears. The woman's gaze darted toward the door, her voice sharp. "We can't let them get it." Without thinking, I clutched the box tighter and stepped back, my spine pressing against the shed wall. The man moved toward me, slow, measured, like a predator. Then, the shed door slammed open so hard it rattled the frame. A tall figure stepped inside, wearing a long black coat and a rain-streaked brimmed hat that shadowed their face. They didn't say a word, but the air shifted instantly. Danger, control, authority. The man in front of me cursed under his breath. "You shouldn't be here." The newcomer's voice was low, steady. "Neither should you." Lightning cracked outside, illuminating the stranger's face for a brief second. And that's when my knees nearly buckled. It was Daniel. My husband. Alive. The woman in red hissed like she'd seen a ghost. "You were supposed to be dead." Daniel's eyes found mine, full of urgency, but also guilt. "Eleanor, give me the box. Now." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might split my ribs. "You left me. You let us believe you were gone for 21 years. He took a step forward. "I had to. For your safety. But if you don't give me that box, they will kill you and Hannah before the night is over." Behind him, another clap of thunder shook the air, and I realized we weren't alone. There were more shadows moving outside. Hannah gripped my arm so tight her nails dug in. "Mom, what do we do?" I looked at Daniel. At the man and woman. At the box in my hands. 3 choices. 3 possible betrayals. And no time to decide. My fingers trembled against the box's worn edges. The storm outside roared like it wanted to swallow the shed whole, and the tension inside was just as violent. Daniel's eyes bore into mine, pleading, commanding, but holding something else I couldn't quite name. The man in the dark suit shifted his weight, ready to pounce. The woman in red raised the gun higher. The choice had to be made. I tightened my grip, my voice cold. "No one's getting this until I know what's inside." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Eleanor. I've been lied to for 21 years, I snapped, stepping toward the center of the room. "You all want it so badly. Then you can fight each other for it." Before anyone could react, I slammed the box down on the old wooden table. The sound cracked through the air like gunfire. The woman in red lunged first, but Daniel blocked her. The man in the suit came from the other side, grabbing for the latch. And that's when the door blew open again. Not from the wind. From a boot. 4 figures in tactical gear stormed in, masks covering their faces, rifles up. "Drop it. Now," one barked. The man in the suit froze. The woman in red cursed and slowly lowered her weapon. One of the masked men strode forward and picked up the box like it was nothing more than a lunch bag. He turned to Daniel. "We've got it. Let's go." My stomach dropped. "We?" Daniel's gaze softened, almost apologetic. "I told you, Eleanor. I never left you. I've been working to protect you all these years. This was the last step." Hannah's voice cracked. "Protect us from what?" Daniel's answer was drowned out by the sound of tires screeching outside again, different ones this time. The tactical team froze, exchanging looks. One of them swore. "They found us." Daniel grabbed my arm. "Eleanor, stay close to me. Whatever happens, don't let go." Then the gunfire started. The first shot shattered the shed's back window, spraying shards across the floor. I dropped to my knees instinctively, pulling Hannah down with me. Daniel's grip on my arm tightened as the tactical men returned fire. The air was chaos, splintering wood, deafening blasts, and the acrid sting of gunpowder thick in my throat. "Move," one of the masked men barked, motioning us toward the narrow back exit. But before we could take a step, the woman in red grabbed me from behind, pressing something cold and sharp to my throat. "No one's leaving," she hissed in my ear. Daniel froze mid-stride, his gun half-raised. "Let her go." The woman's grip only tightened. "Hand me the box, or she dies." Except, there was no box. The masked man who had taken it earlier was gone. Vanished. Daniel's eyes darted around, realizing the same thing. "He's not with us anymore." The woman in red's face twisted. "Liar." Another shot rang out, this one closer. A bullet tore into the wall just inches from Hannah's head. She screamed, and something in me snapped. I slammed my heel down on the woman's foot and drove my elbow back into her ribs. She gasped and stumbled, the knife clattering to the ground. Daniel was on her in a second, pinning her to the floor. "Go, Eleanor," he shouted. I grabbed Hannah's hand and ran for the back door. But when I yanked it open, I froze. A man stood there. Not masked. Not armed. Just smiling. "I've been waiting a long time to meet you, Mrs. Carter," he said smoothly, eyes flicking toward the shed behind me. "You've been holding something that belongs to me." Before I could answer, he stepped aside, and two black SUVs roared up behind him, their doors opening in unison. "Get in," he ordered. "Or your daughter doesn't make it to tomorrow." The night air was cold enough to bite, but the chill running through me had nothing to do with the temperature. Hannah's fingers clutched mine so tight it hurt, but I didn't dare loosen my grip. The man's calm, deliberate smile never wavered as the SUVs idled, their engines a low growl in the dark. Daniel emerged from the shed behind me, one arm still pressing the woman in red against the wall. His gaze locked on the stranger. "Reeves." The name came out like a curse. Reeves tilted his head in acknowledgement. "Daniel. Still playing the hero, I see. Though you're running out of time." He glanced at me. "Your husband owed me something, 21 years ago. And I don't like debts going unpaid." My stomach dropped. "My husband, David?" Reeves' eyes glittered. "You think he left you for another woman?" "No, Mrs. Carter. He was taken. And he stayed away because he knew what would happen if he didn't." My pulse thudded in my ears. "You're lying." He smirked. "Am I?" "He tried to protect you, but he failed." Daniel stepped closer, his gun trained on Reeves. "You're not taking her." Reeves didn't flinch. "If you kill me, Daniel, you'll never find the other half of the key." "What key?" I demanded. Reeves' smile widened. "The one that opens the vault your husband died for." Hannah whimpered beside me, her eyes darting to the SUVs. Reeves gestured toward them again. "Get in. I'll give you answers, and maybe your husband." Daniel's voice was low but urgent. "Eleanor, if you get in that car, you may not come back." But if Reeves was telling the truth, David, my David, might still be alive. The weight of 21 years of betrayal, grief, and unanswered questions pressed on me. And for the first time in decades, I felt the pull of hope. I looked at Hannah, then at Reeves, and stepped forward. The SUV smelled faintly of leather and something sharper, gun oil. Reeves sat across from me in the back, legs crossed casually, as though we were on our way to a business luncheon instead of whatever this was. Through the tinted windows, the headlights of Daniel's truck followed at a careful distance, shadowing us down the narrow rural road. Reeves broke the silence first. "You want to know the truth, Mrs. Carter? It's ugly. And it won't make you feel better." I kept my voice steady. "I've lived with ugly for 21 years. Try me." His gaze flicked over me, assessing, like a jeweler inspecting a flawed diamond. "Your husband was part of something bigger than you can imagine. A financial syndicate. Billions in assets hidden from governments, buried in shell companies, routed through offshore banks. He was their architect, until he decided to burn it all down. The air in the SUV felt heavier. David was an accountant, I said, almost to myself. Reeves' laugh was humorless. That's what he let you believe. He discovered a vault, a literal one, that contained enough leverage to dismantle the entire syndicate. And he took half the key. I have the other half. Why? My voice cracked, and I hated that he heard it. Because he thought splitting the key between us would keep us both alive. He was wrong. The woman you think he left you for? She wasn't his mistress. She was a courier. He was trying to move the key piece through her. And she vanished with him the same night. A sharp ache bloomed in my chest. You're saying he didn't abandon me? That he's been alive. Reeves' expression didn't soften. Alive, until a month ago. That's when I lost contact. Something inside me fractured at his next words. I think your husband is dead, Mrs. Carter. But what he left behind is worth more than his life. The SUV slowed, turning onto a long gravel drive. At the end stood a sprawling estate lit by security floodlights. Reeves leaned in close, his voice almost a whisper. If you help me open that vault, you'll inherit everything he wanted for you, and everything the people who killed him would kill you for. The door opened before I could answer, and cold air rushed in. This wasn't just about answers anymore. It was about survival. The moment my boots hit the gravel, I felt the weight of the estate pressing in on me. The place wasn't a home, it was a fortress. Security cameras pivoted with a mechanical hum, tracking my every move. Reeves walked ahead, the crunch of his shoes sharp in the night. Stay close, he said, his voice low but firm. And don't speak to anyone unless I tell you to. Inside, the air was warm, perfumed with something expensive and faintly floral. It was the kind of place where money seeped into every surface. Polished marble floors, gold-accented columns, chandeliers that seemed to drip light like honey. But none of it mattered. Because standing at the far end of the grand hallway, half hidden in the shadow of a doorway, was a man I knew down to my bones. David. Older. Leaner. His hair, once dark, was now threaded with silver. There was a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were the same shade of stormy blue I had memorized in a different lifetime. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. For 21 years, I had hated him, grieved him, cursed him. Now he was here, alive. But before I could speak, Reeves' hand clamped around my wrist. Not yet, he murmured. You need to hear him first. David stepped forward slowly, like a man walking through fog. His gaze locked on mine, and for a second, I thought I saw relief flash across his face, until I saw the gun holstered at his hip. I told you not to bring her here, David said to Reeves, his voice low, dangerous. Reeves didn't flinch. You told me a lot of things. Most of them turned out to be lies. David's eyes flicked back to me. Something passed between us, something sharp and unspoken. Eleanor, he said quietly, you don't understand what's happening. And that's when the heavy double doors behind him slammed shut, and I heard the sound of bolts locking into place. I was trapped. With both of them. And I still didn't know who the real enemy was. The sound of those locks sliding into place echoed through my chest like a warning drumbeat. Reeves' hand was still on my arm, but I could feel my pulse hammering so hard I thought it might break skin. David took a slow step forward, the light catching on the scar above his eye. Eleanor, he said again, but this time there was something raw in his voice, almost pleading. If you trust Reeves, you'll die in this house. If you trust me, he hesitated. You might live. I wanted to laugh in his face. Trust you? This was the man who walked out on me, on our children, for another woman without a word of explanation. And now he was standing here, talking about my survival like it was some twisted negotiation. What do you want from me? I demanded. Because whatever game this is, I'm not playing. Reeves stepped between us, his presence like a steel wall. She's here because she deserves answers, he said. And because your time's up, David. They know you're still alive. David's jaw tightened. They've known for weeks. That's why I sent the message. What message? I asked. David's eyes met mine, and for a second, I swore I saw guilt there. The one you ignored. My stomach turned. I'd deleted an anonymous email 2 weeks ago, thinking it was spam. It had only 2 words, "Don't travel." Eleanor, David said, his voice low, the woman I left you for, she never existed. She was a cover. I disappeared because if I stayed, you and the kids would be dead. My throat went dry. You expect me to believe that? Before he could answer, the lights in the grand hallway flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging us into darkness. That's when I heard it, boots pounding toward us. Not one pair. Many. Reeves hissed, "They're here. We have to move." David grabbed my hand without asking, and despite every instinct screaming to pull away, I let him lead me. Because somewhere in the pitch black, I could hear the safety of a gun clicking off. And it wasn't aimed at him. David's grip was bruising, but I didn't dare pull free. The darkness was thick, swallowing every shape except the faint outline of his shoulders ahead of me. Reeves moved like a shadow, pulling open what looked like a perfectly ordinary bookshelf, until it creaked forward to reveal a narrow passage behind it. Cold air seeped out, smelling faintly of earth and rust. "In," Reeves ordered. I hesitated. "Where does it go?" "Farther from whoever's coming for you," David said, his tone clipped. The thud of boots on marble grew louder, faster. Somewhere behind, glass shattered, and I heard a man bark an order. The words were muffled, but one cut through clearly, my name. I stepped into the tunnel. The bookshelf closed behind us, sealing us in darkness again until Reeves flicked on a narrow beam from a flashlight. The tunnel walls were damp stone, with pipes running along the ceiling. Every step echoed, and every echo made me imagine someone right behind us. "You have 30 seconds, I hissed at David. "Tell me what this is." His jaw worked before he spoke. "When I left 21 years ago, I didn't leave you for a woman. I left because I stole something, information. Files worth billions. The kind of thing people kill for. I thought if I disappeared, they'd stop looking at you and the kids. Did they?" He didn't answer. Reeves suddenly stopped, his flashlight catching movement ahead. A figure stood in the shadows, motionless. My heart lurched until the beam caught a face I didn't recognize, middle-aged, expression unreadable. "She's here," the man said, his voice calm. David stepped in front of me, but the stranger's eyes weren't on him. They were locked on me. "You," he said softly, almost reverently. "You're the reason they never stopped hunting." The sound of boots was back, closer, closing in from behind and ahead. Trapped. The tunnel felt smaller with each breath I took. The stranger's eyes didn't waver, and that eerie calm in his voice was worse than any shouted threat. "What do you mean, I'm the reason?" I asked, forcing my tone to stay steady. He took a single step closer, and Reeves' hand went to his gun. David moved too, his body half in front of me like a shield, but I could feel the tension in him. He already knew what was coming. 23 years ago, the man said slowly, "You signed a document you didn't read. Buried in the paperwork for your first mortgage." I shook my head. "That's impossible." It wasn't just a mortgage, Eleanor." His voice sharpened. "It was an authorization to store something under your name. Something the world's most powerful people have been trying to get back ever since. The files David took were locked under your identity. He hid them there because no one would suspect you." I turned to David, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Is this true?" His silence was an answer in itself. The sound of boots was closer now, a rush of them, echoing like a drumbeat down the stone walls. Reeves swore under his breath. "We need to move. Now." But the stranger didn't flinch. "You can run, but it won't matter. They don't care about him anymore. They want you, Eleanor. And they will never stop." Something inside me cracked, not fear, but a cold, clear anger. I'd spent decades rebuilding a life David had shattered, raising 3 children on my own. And now, all along, I'd been walking around with a target on my back. I met the stranger's gaze, my voice low. "Then they're about to find out I'm not as easy to catch as he was." Behind us, the tunnel filled with shouts and flashlights cutting through the dark. Reeves yanked me forward, David on my heels. But this time, I wasn't just running for my life. I was running toward answers, and revenge. We burst out of the tunnel into a low-ceilinged service room lit by a single flickering bulb. Rusted tools lined the walls, and an ancient freight elevator stood in the corner like a waiting coffin. Reeves didn't hesitate. He wrenched the gate open and shoved me inside. David followed, but I caught the flash of guilt on his face. Guilt, and fear of me. The elevator rattled and groaned as it lurched upward. Reeves kept his weapon pointed at the doorway, but I was watching David. "All those years you let me believe you'd abandoned us for another woman," I said, my voice hard. "You could have told me the truth." He shook his head. "If you'd known, they'd have killed you." I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "No, David. You didn't tell me because you wanted control. Even now, you think you're the one making the choices. But you've already lost that." The elevator shuddered to a stop. Reeves slid the gate back and motioned us into a narrow alley that smelled of rain and motor oil. The city loomed ahead, neon signs blinking through the fog. "This is your window," Reeves said, glancing at me. "Once we step out there, you disappear. I can get you safe." I shook my head. "No. Safe isn't enough anymore." David frowned. "Eleanor. I've spent 21 years surviving," I cut him off. "Now it's time to end this." Reeves hesitated, then handed me a small device no bigger than a lighter. "Press this when you're ready. It'll bring me to you." I pocketed it without another word and stepped out into the alley. My mind was already moving 3 steps ahead, finding the files, exposing whoever was behind this, and making sure they never came near me or my children again. Somewhere behind us, the boots were back. They were still chasing me. Good. They had no idea I was leading them exactly where I wanted them. The rain had stopped by the time I reached the steel and glass tower on the corner of Graydon and Fifth. The building looked sterile, polished, like nothing dark could ever happen inside. But I knew better. I walked through the revolving doors without hesitation, the faint scent of antiseptic and cold metal greeting me. The marble lobby gleamed under white fluorescent lights, and 2 uniformed guards glanced at me before looking away. I wasn't dressed like a threat, just a damp woman in a long black coat. Exactly what I wanted them to think. The receptionist smiled thinly. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, leaning just close enough for her to see the steel in my eyes. "Tell Victor Hale I'm here. He'll want to see me." Her fingers froze over the keyboard for just a fraction of a second, and I knew I'd hit the right nerve. She didn't ask who I was. She just picked up the phone. Minutes later, I was being led into an elevator by another guard. No words, just a quiet hum of tension in the air. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the electric current of finally moving toward the truth. When the doors opened on the top floor, Victor Hale was already waiting. Tall, silver-haired, in a tailored suit that screamed money and danger. "Eleanor," he said smoothly, as if my name tasted expensive. "You've caused me quite a bit of trouble." I stepped inside his office, the city stretching out in glittering lights behind him. Not nearly enough trouble yet. He chuckled. Brave. Or foolish? Do you have any idea what I've done to protect you all these years? I tilted my head. If your idea of protection is making me a widow in everything but paperwork, then yes, I'm fully aware. His smile faded. You still don't understand, do you? You were never meant to survive this long. I took a slow step forward, keeping my hands relaxed at my sides. Then you'll be disappointed to hear I'm not here to survive. I'm here to end you. From the corner of my vision, I saw the movement, 2 men stepping out of the shadows, guns low but ready. Perfect. Because I had already pressed the little device Reeves gave me. And somewhere in this city, backup was on its way. The 2 men with guns didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their slow, deliberate steps toward me were enough to send a cold shiver racing down my spine, though I refused to let it show. Victor Hale stayed behind his desk, fingers steepled, watching me like I was a chess piece he'd already planned to sacrifice. You really think Reeves will make it in time? He said softly. Do you even know what kind of man he is? I know enough, I replied, shifting slightly so I could keep both gunmen in sight. And I know he's the only reason you haven't buried me already. Victor's lips curved in a humorless smile. You've been living in a fairy tale, Eleanor. Reeves doesn't save people. He trades them. I opened my mouth to answer. But that's when the building shuddered. A deep, vibrating boom rattled the floor, followed by the muffled wail of the fire alarm. One of the guards glanced at the other, momentarily distracted. That was all I needed. I lunged sideways, grabbing the nearest heavy crystal award off the shelf and smashing it into the first man's wrist. His gun clattered to the floor. Before the second man could aim, a shot rang out, sharp, clean, and nothing like the chaotic spray of amateurs. The second guard dropped, his weapon sliding toward my feet. And there, stepping through the now open door with the calm of someone who'd walked into hell before and lived to tell about it, was Reeves. He didn't look at me first. His eyes went straight to Victor. We're done playing. Victor leaned back, pretending to be unshaken, but I saw the flicker of tension in his jaw. You have no idea what you're walking into, Reeves. Oh, I know exactly, Reeves said, crossing the room with the kind of measured danger that made the air itself feel heavier. And so does Eleanor. That's why we're both here. He stopped beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, and lowered his voice just enough for me to hear. You ready to hear the truth? I swallowed, my fingers tightening around the gun I'd picked up. Only if you're ready to bleed for it. Victor chuckled darkly. Oh, you'll both be bleeding before the night is over. And with that, the glass wall behind his desk went black. Something, or someone, was on the other side. The blackout tint melted away like ink washing off glass, and my stomach clenched so hard it felt like someone had hooked a fist inside me and twisted. Behind that wall wasn't a city skyline. It was a room. A sterile, dimly lit room, more like a holding cell, its walls padded, a single bed shoved in the corner. And on that bed, slouched but unmistakably alive, was Daniel. My husband. The man I'd buried in my heart 21 years ago. He was thinner, older, and his once dark hair was streaked with silver, but his eyes, when they met mine, were the exact shade I'd dreamed about in my loneliest nights. Eleanor. His voice was hoarse, as if it had been unused for years. My knees nearly gave out. Reeves' hand pressed briefly to my back, steadying me, but his own posture had shifted, tense, coiled, like he was expecting an attack. Victor's voice sliced through the thick air. You see, Eleanor, he didn't leave you. He was redirected. I spun toward him. You locked him away. Victor shrugged. Not locked. Preserved. Protected. Daniel had information people would kill for. Unfortunately, he didn't trust me enough to hand it over. So, I kept him safe until the right leverage came along. My pulse was a roar in my ears. And you thought I was leverage? Victor's eyes gleamed. You still are. Daniel lurched to his feet, moving toward the glass. Eleanor, don't trust. A high-pitched alarm blared. The glass wall began sliding downward into the floor. 2 more armed men stormed into the room from the other side, grabbing Daniel before he could reach me. Reeves moved faster than I thought humanly possible, gun drawn, shot cracking through the noise, but one of the men yanked Daniel back just in time. The bullet hit the wall instead. Victor's calm smile never faltered. If you want him alive, you'll do exactly what I say. Reeves' jaw tightened. Or. Victor tilted his head toward Daniel, who was now being dragged toward another door. Or you'll watch him disappear, again. I'd already lost him once. I wouldn't, let it happen again. But to save him, I might have to give Victor exactly what he wanted. And what he wanted was me. I didn't even realize my hands were shaking until Reeves' palm closed over mine, steady but firm, his eyes locked on mine as if silently begging me not to give in. But my gaze kept drifting to Daniel. His wrists were bound now, a dark bruise blooming under his jaw where one of Victor's men had struck him. Every muscle in me screamed to run to him, to shield him like I used to shield our children from nightmares. Victor stepped closer, his cologne a sharp, clinical scent that made me want to recoil. Eleanor, he said softly, this can end without blood. All you have to do is agree to the terms. What terms? My voice was low, careful. You come with me, tonight. You stay until I have what I need from Daniel. Then, maybe, I let you both go. Reeves moved between us. She's not going anywhere. Victor's eyes flicked toward him. You're in no position to dictate anything, Mr. Reeves. You have one gun. I have a building full of men who don't mind cleaning up messes. Daniel tried again to step forward, but the guards yanked him back. Don't do this, Eleanor, he shouted. Whatever he's after, it's not worth it. But it was worth it. At least, to me. Because the thought of Daniel disappearing again, maybe forever, was more unbearable than the danger I knew I was walking into. I turned to Reeves, my heart cracking under the weight of his expression. Get him out when you can. Don't wait for me. Reeves' voice was a low growl. Don't you dare. I stepped around him, toward Victor. Fine. You have me. But you let him go first. Victor smiled, slow and cold. Ah. I knew the Eleanor I remembered was still in there. He gestured to his men, and for one suspended moment, hope flared in me, until I saw the glint in his eyes. Daniel was shoved not toward the exit, but toward another hallway, darker and narrower. Where are you taking him? I demanded. Victor's smile widened. Someplace you'll never think to look, unless, of course, you keep your end of the bargain. That's when I realized, Victor never intended to let either of us go. The door closed behind Daniel with a metallic slam that felt like it was sealing my own fate. Victor's men circled, their boots heavy on the marble floor. Reeves stood frozen for a beat, then I caught the subtle shift of his stance, the tightening of his jaw. He wasn't giving up. And neither was I. Where to first? I asked Victor, my tone dripping with reluctant compliance. He studied me for a long moment, clearly savoring the illusion of control. Upstairs. Somewhere private. We have details to discuss. Perfect. I forced myself to meet his gaze with just enough defeat to convince him I'd stopped fighting. My mind, however, was already cataloguing every door, every shadow, every possible exit between here and that private room. We moved through a wide hallway lined with ornate mirrors. That's when I caught Reeves in the reflection, half hidden, slipping behind one of Victor's guards like a ghost. He had followed. Victor guided me into a richly furnished study with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a desk that looked carved from a single slab of mahogany. The windows were bolted shut, but the air carried a faint smell of salt water, meaning we were close to the docks. That was leverage I could use later. "Sit," Victor said, motioning toward a leather chair. I sat, crossing my legs to mask the way my heel pressed against the floor in slow, deliberate taps, the signal Reeves and I had agreed on years ago. 3 slow, 2 fast. Danger. Watch my hands. Victor leaned on the desk. "Do you know what Daniel stole from me?" I kept my voice neutral. "I can guess." He smiled, shark-like. "A ledger. Names. Numbers. Accounts that could topple half the people in this city if they were misplaced." So that was it. Not love. Not revenge. Power. Always power. I glanced at the desk, noting the antique ink blotter and the heavy brass paperweight shaped like a globe. My fingers itched to reach for it, not to throw, but to hide the small flash drive Reeves had slipped into my palm in the hallway. Victor didn't notice. He was too busy talking, pacing, enjoying the sound of his own voice. When his back turned, I slid the drive under the lip of the globe. My pulse hammered, but my face stayed calm. Victor stopped pacing, looking back at me with that same smug satisfaction. "You still have a choice, Eleanor. Stay with me, and Daniel lives. Try to cross me, and you'll lose him for good." I smiled faintly, masking the fire burning in my chest. "Then I guess I'll have to be convincing. Because in less than 24 hours, I planned to make Victor believe I was his only ally, right before I burned his entire empire to the ground." The next morning, Victor's men were gone, dispatched to tighten loose ends in the city. That left just him, me, and 2 guards outside the door. I played my part to perfection. I asked questions about his business, leaned closer when he spoke, laughed softly at his bitter jokes. He believed the performance because he needed to. Men like Victor always did. By midday, I had the full layout of his operation, where he kept the ledgers, the cash reserves, and the server that held the blackmail files he used to control politicians, police chiefs, and CEOs. What he didn't know was that Reeves had been moving through the house all morning, silent as smoke. Every time Victor's attention wandered, I signaled him with a glance or the faintest shift of my hand. He was in place. When Victor finally left for a call, I moved fast. The paperweight came away from the desk, revealing the flash drive. I plugged it into the desktop computer and watched the progress bar crawl forward as Reeves downloaded every single incriminating file. Then, step 2. We uploaded everything to a secure drop server, set the release timer for 24 hours, and added one final line in the note to the recipients. "Courtesy of the woman who refuses to forgive." When Victor returned, I was exactly where he'd left me, smiling faintly, sipping the whiskey he'd poured. That night, I sat across from him at dinner, our knees almost touching. He thought he'd won. He thought Daniel's silence meant surrender. He thought my steady gaze meant I was his. At midnight, the city erupted. Phones buzzed, news alerts screamed, and the power in Victor's compound flickered as every name, every secret, every account number went public. He realized too late that it was me. By the time his guards reached for me, Reeves was already there, gun drawn, Daniel behind him. Victor lunged. But I didn't flinch. I stepped forward and said the words I'd waited 21 years to say to another man, and now to him. "You don't get to destroy my life twice." The last thing I saw before we walked out was the look on Victor's face, not anger, not fear, just the dawning realization that his empire was gone, piece by piece, forever. We never saw Victor again. Rumors said he fled the country. Others claimed he didn't make it past the docks that night. I didn't care. Daniel went home. Reeves returned to his quiet life. And I I learned that closure doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from making sure the people who hurt you can never, ever do it again. And I had made sure of that.